One of my favorite books is The Book of Joy. The late Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, they meet to talk about what joy is. And it's an absolutely extraordinary book. And I was in a deep depression. I think this was actually after getting fired from Wework. And I was reading The Book of Joy, and man, was it helpful. One of the things Archbishop Desmond Tutu talks about is the peace and reconciliation tribunals that he created. He had the mothers whose sons had been killed by warriors from the other side. He had those mothers forgive the killers of those mothers' sons.
Wow.
He said, listen, you are holding this upset. And by holding this upset, this anger toward the killers, you are actually causing yourself pain and putting yourself in the space of a victim in a way that you don't need to be. Right. It's time for you to let that go. And the way to let that go is to forgive. And by creating those relationships between those mothers and those soldiers, it created an opportunity for transmuting that toxin through that system, which is just powerful and incredible.
Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I'm Faust Chicho, and today I have with me the all-time reigning 3-repeat champion, Mr. Ted Wallach. Let me remind you who this wonderful man is. Ted Wallach cut his teeth under Martin Scorsese and directed and produced for over a decade in Hollywood, Bollywood, and the Middle East. Ted was the first creative director of Wework, and he was the creative force behind their campaigns, which ranged from ending oil subsidies in America to building wells in Africa with charity water. He was a visiting scholar at the Stanford Peace Innovation Lab and has a clinical practice and coaching global founders using a combination of Taoism and quantum mechanics to overcome obstacles and aid them in manifesting their next big idea into existence. He's currently working on his first book and podcast, which shares the same name that I love, How to Get Fired. And he's launching an app called Totem, which, wait till you guys hear about this. It just might change the world. Ted, thank you so much for beaming in again, brother. Returning champion of the world. Thanks for beaming in, Brad.
Great to be here, Faust. Thank you so much for having me again. I appreciate it. I don't know who you were just reading about, but he sounds like an interesting guy.
He's a great guy. Good talker. Really, really big-hearted guy. Love him.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now I know from the many times that we've spoken that you've been fired from some of the biggest places in the world to be fired from. Which was the impetus for your book and the podcast that you're launching. By the way, I'm thrilled that this has become a book and a podcast, because I just think it should be an ongoing conversation with this society we're living in. But let's start with this. Would you feel comfortable delving into some of your top 3 firing stories?
Sure. Well, let's go with Wework. So
go with Wework.
One part that's fun about Wework is, although I was the original creative director, I wasn't the only original creative director, but I was the only original creative director in the job of creative director as I understood it. So what I mean by that is Adam hired me and Miguel hired Devin. And Devin was also the creative director because Devin was the creative director of the product. I mean, he's an architect, like he was actually building the space. And I was the creative director of, I guess, marketing, except for we weren't doing any marketing because we were filling buildings too quickly. So we were sort of just doing events and experiences, and it was awesome. I mean, I loved it, and we had a lot of fun. And we tried to end oil subsidies in America on behalf of Wework. So at one point, Adam decided that he was like, look, Ted, I don't really understand what you do or how to manage you. So I'm just going to hand you over to Miguel. Miguel's the creative, he'll figure out what you're up to and then try to manage you accordingly. And I was like, okay, that seems reasonable. I had American Express, Amex Open or American Express was in the building, but Amex Open was their new product. And they really wanted content for their new product. And I thought, I've got a whole business or a whole building filled with new business owners who are constantly talking about their new business. That's content. And so what we did was we filmed them talking about their new business and then had Amex pay for each of those videos. And then that money went to build the wells in Africa for charity water. Now, unfortunately, I think Miguel really liked this idea, but he wasn't there. He was off in Korea when Adam came back from, I think he had just had a meeting with Benchmark and was probably thinking more in financial terms. And so when I told him about the work we had done with Charity Water and all the other groups, I had put together a bunch of other brands and causes, Hunts Point Alliance for Children with HP and Microsoft with Falling Whistles and a bunch of other different like social causes with brands. And his question was, what is the ROI on this? And my response was,
what's an ROI?
What's ROI? I didn't know what it was. I was a film. I'd made movies.
That would have been my response too.
There's no ROI in film directing. Like I didn't know what that meant.
Do I look this up or do I just ask him?
Right, exactly. I was like, I'm not sure what that is. And he's like, you understand that we sell square footage, right? We are, that's what we do here. And I was like, that was the first time in my entire time at Wework that I even came across even realized, wait a minute, no, that's part of the business. That's at least a big part of the business is selling square footage or renting square footage.
Hence we crash.
I'll say this about what I really learned from Marty and from Adam is I started to see what I call a boy king and an archetype of a boy king. And to be clear, this is in me as well. This isn't like they're just the bad guys. And also, I think it's very important to realize when we have someone who's in a leadership position, it's one thing to make them wrong and bad. And it feels good for sure. Like it's fun, but it's not all that helpful. I think what's a lot more helpful is to say, what is it in us that is unacknowledged? What is unconscious in us that's showing up in our leaders? Because I believe that anything that we are unconscious of in our own humanity will show up as the shadow of our leaders. And so there were definitely times when I was pissed at Adam and felt like what he was doing was inappropriate and ineffective or what have you. And I think that leaders don't come out of a vacuum. They are created by the people around them. And the question is, what responsibility can we take for that? And what can we learn from it? Because I think that's a far more powerful way to look at leaders than to simply throw them under the bus.
Right.
The work that I'm interested in, if I was asked recently, my wife asked me, she said, what are you doing and my coach asked me, what are you doing in the big scheme of things? What are you up to? I said, I'm coaching. Yeah. Okay. But that's what you're doing. How are you doing it? What is the big plan? What is the idea? What is the way behind it? And what I realized is the way, whether it be coaching, whether it be running circles, actually circle keeping, because we don't run circles, we keep circles, whether it be writing the book, podcast, that sort of thing. All of it is in the service of trying to move from seeing the world in terms of crime and punishment, right and wrong, good and bad, a binary, which you could say happens in the base of the brain, the fight or flight, and moving to a place where we start to see the world in terms of restorative justice. And the concept with restorative justice is that nobody is right or wrong, but the system has toxins or shadow in it. And the work is to move the shadow or move the toxins through the system, transmute them and out. And to me, that's a really powerful way to see the world. And it's a difficult way to see the world. It takes I don't want to say it takes effort, but it takes attention, it takes awareness, and it takes, I would say, some kind of diligence.
Yeah, all those things take effort, especially at first, because it's a paradigm. It would be a paradigm shift for most people. It would be a shift away from this polarity and duality that we, everything is going to, it's funny. I think it might've been Dr. Joe who told me this, but he was like, when you start to have two things vibrating off kilter, either they're going to align or they're going to fall away. They're going to, and so the polarity that's happening these last 10 years, and I think why it's gotten so, because it's got to figure out what it wants to do. Either it's going to have to start vibrating at a closer frequency together, or it's going to really have to split. And I love this idea. It's highly evolved. But how do you sell it?
Sure. That's a great question. I have a couple of answers. The first answer is to say, I do the work myself, and I'm aware that I am not in a restorative justice mindset. I am sometimes in a restorative justice mindset, and sometimes I'm in a crime and punishment mindset. And the more times I can notice myself in a crime and punishment mindset and move myself into a restorative justice mindset, or move myself from a Newtonian mindset to a quantum mindset, or David Hawkins would say from a force mindset to a power mindset, or in very simple terms, a fear mindset to a love mindset. And I don't mean love like loving somebody else. I mean love like a higher level of consciousness love. The more I can do that work, the better I get at it, the more I can the more I can invite others to do that work, or at least model to others how to do that work. And as we do that more together, we all get better at it. But there are some very specific tools that I have found that are incredibly powerful for doing that. One of them is Circle. Circle has made a huge and powerful and profound change on my life. So my teacher, Elizabeth Clement, she is a shaman and a restorative justice mediator in New York. So first she was a restorative justice mediator and a master's of social work, and she was spending time in the restorative justice space. And then people suggested to her that she had shamanic ability beyond what maybe most people have, or she would never put it that way. But basically, and people invited that she had a certain way to see, or a certain kind of medicine that could come to fruition, that if she studied with the shamans from South America, then that would be helpful for her. And she did. And then she started doing that work. And she infused that work into Circle, which has been really powerful and amazing. And so I trained with her, and I found this tool of Circle to be a life transforming tool in so many different ways. Because one thing is it's a tool you can use, and another thing is it's a way of being in the world that is fundamentally different than I had ever understood being before. So I can explain that. There are 3 rules in Circle that are passed down through the lineage of Circle. The first rule is you can only talk when you have the talking piece. And that seems so simple and so, let's say, mundane, but it's actually wildly profound and magical. Because in essence, what it means is somebody passes you a talking piece, and you now have the autonomy to speak for as long as you choose, to say whatever you want. Other people are going to listen and hold what you're saying in a non-judgmental, or at least as best not right. as least much judgment as they can put on it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they're holding a container. They're not interacting with what you're saying. They're holding what you're saying, which is really fundamentally different. They're trying to know you, not understand you.
Right.
And while they're doing that, you aren't asked to do anything besides the work that you are doing, which is to pull, as they put it, pull your shadow up out of your body and throw it into the fire, or find the parts of you that you are unconscious of. And unlike in any other situation that I'm aware of, you are being listened to and not interrupted for as long as you need, in the way that you need, and you choose when you're done. And I don't know anywhere else in the world where that's the case. And the one place I could think of is a stand-up comedian. But the big difference with the stand-up comedian is that the stand-up comedian's job is to entertain you while they're up there. While you're sharing in circle, there is no expectation of you entertaining anybody. You're simply doing your work. And your work is that same work that I was talking about before, which is really, where am I in my amygdala? Where am I in my fight or flight? Where am I in fear? And how can I speak that fear out loud in such a way that I can bring myself into love, or bring myself into power, or bring myself into, there's all kinds of ways of describing it, but that's the general idea.
I love that, man. I love that. They should make that mandatory for all men over 18. Men, listen to me right away. I want to pass a mandate, Mr. Anti-Mandate.
Okay. So the second rule is that the talking piece only goes in one direction, which is really a powerful thing, because what that means is that you're not waiting to talk because you know when you're going to go, and you don't talk when you have something to say. You talk, or you share, really, because it's not really talking. It's almost different than talking. You share when the talking piece comes to you in the order that it comes to you. And the way I see that is, it's not that everyone's voice is equal, but everyone's voice is essential. And to me, that is a really powerful way of thinking about people's voices, because everyone's voice brings something new and different and unique. But making sure that everyone has a chance to speak if they choose to, making it essential, means that you get to hear the wisdom from all sides, from all the different people involved. And that to me is extremely important. And the third rule is, you're always allowed to pass, which means in essence, you're always allowed to not share your voice, share your silence. And as far as I can tell, it's the only place in the world that I'm aware of where your silence can literally be heard, because your silence means something. And what I came to realize is that if you take these rules and you play with them out in the world, they actually become, you actually can always be in circle if you choose to be. And the place where I really got this loud and clear was after Elizabeth trained me to be a circle keeper. I came back and trained with her teacher, Kay Pranis, who wrote the little book of circle processes. She is certainly an elder in the community of restorative justice circles. And you got to imagine Kay, she's short, long gray hair. You know, she has her little cardigan. She's very, older lady. She's sitting in her chair. Her feet barely touch the ground. She does not seem like what you would consider a badass. However, she is absolutely a badass. And she tells a story about how she was in a maximum security prison, and she was sitting next to a gang leader who was in jail for life. And it was their third circle of a set of circles. You often do a set of circles. So for example, Quantum Warrior Circle, which I run, is 12 circles in a row of 90 minutes each circle. You don't have to do it that way, but there's a cadence to that has a certain power. So they were doing a similar kind of thing. It was the third circle. So he was getting used to the idea, and he got the talking piece. And he said, earlier today, one of the other inmates came up to me and was screaming in my face. And normally I would end him for this kind of disrespect.
Yeah.
But I realized that he just had the talking piece. So I let him finish what he had to say. And then he walked away, and that was the end of it. Wow. And what I realized from that story is you always have that opportunity to decide that the other person has the talking piece, And sometimes if you simply let them say whatever it is they need to say, or simply let them pull the shadow up and out of them and throw it into the fire or reintegrate it into the universe in front of you, that might be all the work that is necessary.
Yeah.
I find often when I'm coaching individuals and I'm talking to them about their spouses or partners, that we often want to solve the problem, especially men, but not always. We often want to solve the problem of our spouse. They're saying, this problem, that problem, whatever, and we want to solve it. And what we don't realize is that on some level, they simply have the talking piece and they're pulling shadow. And all they need us to do is hold the space so that they can continue to pull shadow. And the moment that we try to solve the problem, we stop their process.
We're notorious really problem solvers, men.
Sorry?
Men are notorious problem solvers.
Often. I think, though, what's interesting with men, though, is once you come to the realization, and this isn't always true, and it's not always true for me either. There's lots of times where I still try to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. However, when I notice that if I really want to solve the problem, the best thing I can do is not come up with a solution. The best thing I can do is not simply listen, but hold space, hold a container, allow for that which is being said to be resonant in the room without interacting with it. And that actually solves problems. Well, that's like a whole other way of being solution minded.
Yeah, it's true. I should try that one day. I'm just kidding. I do try to remain conscious enough to do that,
As Joe Dispenza would put it, you are more wave, less particle. I love that, because that's the point. If I'm more wave and not particle, or if I'm putting more attention on all of that and less attention on myself, then I'm truly listening as a container that's holding what you are saying. And actually, when I run Quantum Warrior circles, what I often do is I will do a Joe Dispenza meditation at the beginning, specifically the one where they're putting their attention on something finite and then something infinite, and then space and space and space. Because what I realize is when I'm sitting in circle, and even when I'm coaching, and even when I'm speaking with my wife or sitting in circle with my wife, because we do that a lot, I'm putting my attention on space and I'm letting that awareness extend so that I am more wave and less particle. Because if I'm more wave, less particle, I'm more quantum, less Newtonian. I'm more hearing what you're saying, allowing for what you're saying, holding what you're saying in a net, rather than interacting with what you're saying or trying to understand what you're saying. I like to believe that in the most extreme version of this, you wouldn't even have to be speaking the same language, because the emotional content would come across all by itself.
Totally. And oh my God, I had so many thoughts and things I was going to say, but I didn't want, you were on such a roll, I didn't want to interrupt you. No, it's beautiful. I love it. There's a huge difference between, and what you're talking about to me is, so when I'm going to, if I'm gonna write, and I'm gonna try to channel from a higher self, or speak from a higher self, then what I have to do is I have to get out of my analytical mind, and I have to let all those words, or whether they're coming from, it has to come from here, from this place, right? Because if it gets up here, this is a very complex filter, and for a lot of people, it's a prism, right? And when you look through a prism, if the more complex the prism is, the more angles are going to be refracted, and it becomes harder to see through that. If I'm understanding the word I'm using correctly. Actually,
Kay talks about this. She says, we always talk about building a safe space. And she's like, yes, circle has to be safe first and foremost, but really we need a brave space. We need a space where people are willing to allow for that channeling, like you're speaking about. I mean, channel is literally a conduit. It's the same thing. It's contained. It's the same concept. It's a way, or the Tao, the way. It's all the same way of speaking about this esoteric and yet obvious thing where we aren't really, we are just the physical meat suits that are holding this energetic experience that's happening. Or I was reading Ken Wilber today, and he talks about, and actually David Data talked about this when I studied with him, that if you can imagine that version of you that was always here and always will be here and will never change, and get in contact with that. And I believe there's a Zen koan that says, can you show me the face that was here before your parents were born? The idea being that there is that version of you that you are able to connect to that is unchanging. I've been thinking a lot. So I often use the model of Newtonian and quantum, and I am not a physicist. And I would say that when I'm speaking about quantum, I'm talking about it in much more of a metaphor than in an accurate physical model. So with that said, the way I explain to the people I coach the difference between a Newtonian way of experiencing the world and a quantum way of experiencing the world is, if you imagine a baby who is crawling on the floor, and the baby comes up to a large blanket, and on the end of the large blanket is a ball, and the baby wants to get to the ball. Then in Newtonian terms, the baby, just as you said, would have to move through time and space to get to the ball. And that would take effort. But in a quantum way of thinking about it, if the baby were to reach out to the blanket and pull the blanket and the ball flies into the hand of the baby, that would be a quantum approach whereby the baby doesn't have to move through time or space, but simply changes the experience of time and space, or changes the relationship to time and space in such a way that that which they are trying to bring to fruition or trying to manifest comes to be.
Yeah. I love that. And that happens so often, man. People, they write it because we're so materially orientated. We write it off, but that is a perfect example of how we crush probability and defy odds to make things happen for us.
Another example of a way to think about Newtonian and quantum is if you take a handful of paper clips and you toss them onto a glass table, and you want to take each paper clip and have it point in the same direction. Well, if you go to each individual paper clip and you turn it, then through time and space and effort, and quite a bit of effort, you can get all of the paper clips to align toward the direction that you want to go. Let's call that your intention.
Right.
But if instead you bring a magnet close to the table, instantly all of the paper clips will align in the direction of the magnet. And that would be the quantum approach, or the creating an electromagnetic field approach, which obviously Joe Dispenza talks about a lot. The aligning your thoughts and your feelings in such a way that they create a coherent electromagnetic field, such that the intention that you are trying to create aligns everything around you into the right direction.
Even Shakespeare talked about it. Thought, word, and deed. When someone is aligned in thought, word, and deed, there's nothing that they cannot accomplish, right? It goes way back. Everybody understood that. All the great scholars understood it, right?
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that though. I love that with the magnet. I showed a clip on my last podcast about these baby chicks that I think it was on the movie What the Bleep. I got to send it to you one day. It's amazing. It's this crazy experiment they did, this French researcher. But, I wanted to ask you before we got too far ahead here. I love this title, How to Get Fired.
Because thank you.
Could be the biggest, it could be the biggest blessing in disguise, to get to get fired. I mean, it's crazy that it has to come to that, but sometimes it has to. But so is this like a manual on how to like leave a job that you hate, or find the thing that you love? What's the premise of it?
That's a great question. And actually, before I answer it, you said something in that I hadn't thought of before, which I think is quite powerful, which is the same shamans we were speaking about from South America. They talk about, well, specifically Elizabeth, actually, she was speaking to me when I left a teacher that I had worked with for 10 years, Thomas Jones, who trained me in the paradox process and actually turned me on to Dr. Joe Dispenza and was a huge part of my life. And at one point I had to leave him because it was time. And it was really, really difficult and painful and awful, actually. And I asked Elizabeth at the time, I said, why does this have to be so terrible? Why can't we be friends? Why can't we find a new way to have our relationship? That sort of, like, I didn't want it to be all nasty. And her response was, if you want to end a relationship and move on, it's very possible that it has to be in the element of fire, and that it must burn. And that if you want to build a new branch, if you want to grow a new branch on the tree, and you need to get rid of an old branch, you have to burn off the old branch. And that is not a comfortable experience. Or you could say you have to shed a layer of skin if you're a snake. That's the snake in the South for the South American shamans. They speak about that. You start in the South and you shed your layers. And so it's not a pleasant experience. And so how to get fired, I never thought about this before, but fired is literally, fire is in the word for a reason. It is a burning experience. You need to burn off the old in order to invite and allow for the new. And so it's not a nice experience. As much as I try to make it fun in the book, every time I've been fired, it's fucking hurt.
Yeah.
And because it hurts, there's an experience of, because this hurts, it must be bad. And what I've come to learn is, no, because it hurts, it doesn't mean it's bad. Actually, it might be profoundly and powerfully important. And one place I've also seen this is I work with a tantrika who does, what's it called?
Sex magic?
She does do sex magic, but the other thing she specifically does is de-armoring. And what de-armoring is she basically takes her thumbs and pushes them underneath my rib cage, and it's fucking painful. I mean, it really, really hurts. And you start to think, like, why the fuck would anybody want to do this?
Yeah.
And then you realize that what makes it hurt so much is that I'm trying to keep my body tense to hold the thumbs from getting in to the ribs, which she's going to do because I'm allowing her to do. Like, I asked her to do this de-armoring, and she's going to push her thumbs up into my ribs. And that's part of the work. And I need to let go and allow for it to happen. And then when I let go and allow for the thumbs to go, does it still hurt? Yes, but it doesn't hurt anywhere near as much
surrender
of trying to stop it. Yeah, the surrender makes all the difference in the world. It makes such a big difference, Yeah. And especially when she does this around the pubic bone. I mean, that is so painful. It's such a sensitive area of the body.
Yeah.
And to have someone pushing in there and thinking, like, is it going to break my penis? Is it gonna, this,
I know I have organs down there.
Yeah. Like, I know there's something down there that's important. I don't want it to get hurt, but if you trust and you allow and you let go into, as David Hawkins has put it, as you let go, the pain is still there, but it's a different kind of pain. And you can also change your experience of that pain by observing the pain that you're having. I'm starting to try to do that with my emotions now too. It's not so easy. I have a really hard time, especially with food, to do this with food. Like, what is showing up in me around food, and how can I be in touch with it in such a way that it can actually change the way I eat? And I have failed at this miserably, but I'm working on it. It's my new process.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my favorite books is The Book of Joy. the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. They meet to talk about what joy is. And it's an absolutely extraordinary book. And I was in a deep depression. I think this was actually after getting fired from Wework. And I was reading the Book of Joy, and man, was it helpful. And I was actually reading it on Audible so that you actually hear Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama's voice. Oh, it's just an incredible book. One of the things Archbishop Desmond Tutu talks about is the peace and reconciliation tribunals that he created. And no, I guess he led, or he probably wouldn't say he created it, because he would suggest that the container was there all along and that he was allowing for it, but something like that. Anyway, in the peace and reconciliation tribunals, he had the mothers whose sons had been killed by warriors from the other side. He had those mothers forgive the killers of those mothers' sons.
Wow.
And he didn't suggest that they should forgive them because killing their sons was somehow not bad or wrong or something like that. He said, listen, you are holding this upset. And by holding this upset, this anger toward the killers, you are actually causing yourself pain and putting yourself in the space of a victim in a way that you don't need to be. It's time for you to let that go. And the way to let that go is to forgive. And the amazing thing is that when you think about it in a systems holistic way, if you've got killers and the mothers of the sons that the killers killed, if you think about the whole system as one circle, that one circle has a toxin in it, the killing, not who did the killing, but the killing. And then how do you take that toxin out of that system? And what Archbishop Desmond Tutu did was, by getting those mothers to forgive the killers, he created relationships between the mothers and the soldiers. They're not killers, they're soldiers who killed because they were told to. And who knows why they killed, but they killed because they were in war. And by creating those relationships between those mothers and those soldiers, it created an opportunity for transmuting that toxin through that system, which is just powerful and incredible.
So powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I don't know how we got into that. What was that about? That was about how to get fired. Oh, victim. Yeah. So what's the book really about? The book is really about what I do with my work, which is I work with individuals who often in chapter 1 of their life, they did something powerful or financially exciting or something like that. And now in chapter 2 of their life, they want to find something that truly aligns with singing the song they must before they die. And it's a line from Wayne Dyer. And when I read it, I thought, oh my God, that's what I'm up to. I'm trying to support people to sing the song they must before they die. So how to get fired is about singing the song you must before you die. And that either means getting fired from the job you're in so that you can go do the thing you must do, or changing the job that you're in such a fundamental way that it allows you to sing the song you must before you die.
Right.
All that being said, what the book is really about, How to Get Fired, is really about everything I've learned from getting fired, everything I've learned about what it takes to create transformation in your own life, what it takes to find the thing that allows you to sing the song you must before you die, and all of the prisons that I've seen, all the traps that I've seen, all the cages that I've seen that we create ourselves or that are created around us that we find ourselves lost in, and how to make sure to notice those and not get trapped in them and not end up in a prison of our own making, because we often create these awful prisons ourselves. I have so many clients who their prisons are so attractive, and they have nice gold cages and they have nice gold handcuffs to go with their
great view out
cages.
of the bars. Yeah.
Great view, to the point where you can leave the cage door open and they won't leave because they don't even realize they're in a cage.
Nope.
But
So many
they
people.
keep saying next year I'm going to do the thing, and next year I'm going to do the thing, and next year. And it's like next year is now. And maybe that's what the book is also about, is next year is now. It's time. We have an opportunity now to jump out and to do something. And I was listening to Alan Watts, who said something that I thought was really powerful. He said, we all act as if we are on probation.
Mm-hmm.
And man, is that true? It's so true. We act like we're on probation. And his response was, you are not on probation. You are not an accident. You are not here and you do not need to prove anything to anyone. You are not here to demonstrate that you're worthwhile. I've spent so much of my life trying to prove myself as worthwhile. To whom?
Yeah,
who is this person? I mean, it's me, obviously, or it's us, or whatever. We're all one thing. But I did a journey with ketamine, and I did a Joe Dispenza meditation at the same time. It was actually the one where he talks about what change do you want to make in your life?
Changing boxes meditation.
This wasn't changing boxes, although I've done that. Okay. I've done that many times too. But this was.
Oh, I know the one. Yeah. It's an older one.
Yeah, it's an older one. Exactly.
Yes.
And I hadn't done it in a while, actually. Yeah, I've done changing boxes a bunch, but this one's really different. And it's kind of old school too, because he's asking you something very specific. What is that change that you want to make? And I hadn't even thought about it at that point. Now I'm like on 300 milligrams of ketamine and trying to remember what is that change I want to make. And then it came to me really quickly and really clearly, which was kind of cool. And the change was, I've spent most of my life caring about whether I am accepted or appreciated and wanting to be appreciated. And I decided that I didn't want to fire and wire that message any longer, because the message also means you're not appreciated simply because.
That's right.
You have to do something in order to be
validation's tied up with your identity, with your deeds. And that's exactly not what a human is.
Exactly. And so I didn't want to be validated that way anymore. And so instead I chose a new mantra, and the new mantra was, I am welcome. Why? No reason. Simply, I am welcome, not because of anything I have to do. And look, it doesn't work all the time. Sometimes I still need appreciation. Sometimes I still want to know that I'm doing a good job.
You're
sometimes, like there are going to be aspects of this podcast where I'm going to be like, was that cool? Did people respond? Did that make sense? Did that land? Whatever. And there's a part of me that's like, and I'm also welcome. I'm welcome to have my thoughts and my feelings and to share what I have to share, because we're human and we're welcome. We're welcome simply because we're not on probation. And I think the book is very much about remembering that we're not on probation and all the tools necessary to remember we're not on probation.
Awesome, man. I love it. It's so true. We're not a fluke. We're not, an accident. We're not, I don't know how anyone can, I mean, I guess I used to think like that, but I don't know how people do anymore. Some thoughts you used to have become so foreign to you, they're hard to understand where they came from. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how you look at this world, this intelligence, that all the intelligence that's making up everything, and call it a fluke. It can't be a fluke. You know what I mean? If it was a fluke, it would be finite, and it's not. It's never ending. It's infinite, and that is no fluke. That is as masterful and beautiful as anything can be, something that only knows how to breathe, in and out. The expansion, that's the infinity sign. It's the phoenix. It's everything that we've been talking about. But I want to hear about the app, Ted. Tell me about the app. So you developed an app using the mechanics of the circle you've been telling us about, and like what? So how is that going to work in the world? What problems are you trying to fix?
Yeah. So one of the men who was in Quantum Warrior was the former senior developer for 23andMe. And 23andMe,
not Bo.
without getting Bo.
Bo. I know Bo. Bo. Yeah, Bo is a guest. I had Bo on my show.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know Bo. So
yeah.
Bo was this former senior developer of 23andMe, and Bo's actually arriving tomorrow here in Sweden. I'm very excited. And he really appreciated the work in Circle and said to me, I had already started to think about, well, what does it look like as like a digital product or a venture or an app or blah, blah, blah. And I had no idea really. And people were suggesting to me that it was a good idea to try to figure out a way to do that. And I started talking with Chris Gregory, who was one of the original people at PayPal. And he said to me, look, what you're doing with Circle is something that really is powerful. He said, in essence, what you're doing is therapy with strangers or therapy by strangers. And I was like, that sounds like a terrible idea and kind of what we're doing. And he said, some of the best things you can create in the world, you create them by coming up with a really terrible idea, like something that sounds really terrible, like therapy with strangers. And he was suggesting that we make some kind of digital tool, and then we were practicing and trying to make some kind of digital tool online together, and nothing really came to fruition. And then Bo got involved, and then Bo said, wait a minute, I think I know how to do this. And Bo is especially interested in where health and tech come together, and he feels that this is the future, one of the ways in the future for health and tech to meet each other, because there is something very health oriented around Circle. Now, Circle is not therapy. It's not AA. It's not, it has some of those elements to it, but it is a healing experience. And so I think that's what he was referring to and responding to. And so he and I and my wife created Totem. Mm-hmm. And Totem is the idea of Circle at scale. What could we do if we could scale Circle? If we could take Quantum Warrior and give Quantum Warrior a place to live, a bigger platform on which to live with other circles. And that's the idea of Totem. And to both create a community as well as improve the online tool of Circle, because Zoom isn't a very good tool for it for a bunch of different reasons, which I won't go into. But then I realized there's something bigger about it. If you think about it, Facebook, and then all of the things that come along with Facebook, Instagram, and all this other things, I call all of this anti-social media, not social media, because there's nothing social about it. It's actually hurting the bonds of social cohesion. So I'm going to call it anti-social media because I'm not going to market for them. And all of the anti-social media comes from the same concept, which is you all need a campfire. You are all looking for tribe. We'll build you a campfire. And that's what Facebook was supposed to be. And it felt like that. And the question is, why did it feel like that? And I think the answer is because they used gossip. And gossip is a really good way to make people feel like they're creating social cohesion and bonding while destroying social cohesion and bonding and forcing people into a slavery or a mindset whereby they need the tool and then not getting out of the tool what the tool was supposed to provide, and yet they need that even more. So now we need campfire more. Yeah. We need community more, and we're getting it even less, and it's pulling apart and pulling. It's a great business model.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, how do you fix it? Like, what do you do? Because I honestly believe that Facebook and all the things associated with Facebook, all the anti-social media, is actually the most dangerous tool we've ever built.
Yeah.
And
well, it's becoming so for a lot of reasons. Yeah.
I don't even think it's becoming. I think it is and continues to be. And I think it's far more dangerous than anybody even begins to give it credit for. And so then the question is, what do you do about it? And so we go to Bucky Fuller, who said, don't fight the existing reality, create a new reality that makes the old reality obsolete. And of course, I didn't listen to his advice at first. Instead, I fought the existing reality by talking about how horrible Zuckerberg is and how what he did first and foremost was to create face match, which means take two women and compare them to each other. And basically, anti-social media is still that. It's just comparing people to each other at scale. So I don't know why we thought that face match was going to turn into anything powerful or positive and not get significantly worse and worse and worse. But that's exactly what's happened. However, sitting around and yelling about Zuckerberg all day long, although I do that a lot, is just not helpful. And my wife is sick of hearing me talk about it. So then the question is, well, what do you actually do about it? And I thought, well, build something new. Yeah. So Totem is something new. Now, do I think it can rival Facebook? No, but I also think that to rival Facebook in the future is not to create one solution. It's to create a suite of solutions from a lot of different places that actually create community, that actually create intimacy instead of gossip, because intimacy is the fuel we use. Right. Intimacy is a whole different kind of fuel that actually builds social cohesion. And the way we've been doing it is with Quantum Warrior. And now the question is, well, how do you scale Quantum Warrior? Because Quantum Warrior is only for men. And I've been running all the circles mostly. Now I'm starting to scale and we're starting to create new, we're starting to build circle keepers, but it's a very specific kind of thing and not everyone's going to do it. So how do we create it so that more people can use Circle? Because Circle is a technology which the algorithm of, we call it an algorithm, but it's passed down through the lineage from thousands of years ago. And how do we use this tool to actually create intimacy between people? And that's what we're trying to do with Totem.
Very cool, man. I love it. The implications are huge. And Bo is just the man to be helping you bring that in. That's cool. I can't wait to check it out. Say that on a personal level. Yeah. I
also want to say that one of the things that we are coming up against with Totem, which I think is very important, is that this technology, this way of doing things, this circle is not ours. It is something that has been passed down through a long lineage. The particular way we're doing it is from First Nations people of Canada, but there's a mix of different First Nations people, that, and then there's a shamanic aspect to it and a restorative justice aspect to it. The point I'm trying to make is that I'm part of a lineage in that my teacher is Elizabeth and her teacher is Kay. And then she had teachers and teachers and teachers. And this is something that has been passed down for a very long time. It is very much not ours. And it is very important that as we turn it into a technology, that we don't fall prey to some of the things that technology often does, which has become predatory. Right. And, we talk about smartphones. I don't think they're smartphones. I think they're predatory phones. And I think it's important that we're clear about what everything around us is. And so my wife and I and Elizabeth, and then we have some other circle keepers, are doing everything we can, especially because Bo has great ideas. Yeah. And they're very engineer and technical. And then we have to say to ourselves, but wait a minute, is that safe? Is that hurting the container? For example, can you record something that happens in Circle and share it if it's your share? Right. And at first I was like, maybe, and that would be a great marketing opportunity. And then we realized, no, absolutely not. No, you can't open a portal and then have someone record inside the portal. That's not something you can do. And so we're coming up against a lot of those kinds of things and trying to figure out how to stay true to what's there. Yeah.
That'll be an ongoing thing, as technology evolves and and it grows. So but it sounds wonderful. I'm excited for it.
Oh, and let me say, just on the off chance that Tristan Harris is listening to this, I would love to have him on our board. I love what he's doing in terms of thinking about how to protect us from these dangerous tools. And I feel like his insight would be extremely powerful for this kind of tool.
Cool. Well, hopefully somebody gets this to him. We'll put a chapter in there. We'll name it after him so he can go right to it. I'm running out of time with you, Ted, but I want to try to mine a few last gems from you of wisdom before we have to part ways today, but I'm sure you'll be back. I love this question. So let's say you had the ability to broadcast anything you wanted into the hearts and minds of every person on the planet. If you were the programmer, but you could only write one line of code for everyone, what would you give them? What would you tell them? What code would you write?
Maybe I would do the following. So the same shamans, and actually Elizabeth suggested this to me, and this is where Quantum Warrior was really born. She said that from the time that we are 25, now this is men, but let's take it to mean the masculine, okay? Not men, but the masculine polarity, which includes men and women. From the time that we are 25 to the time that we are 50, we are in battle and we are bringing home the spoils of war. Now, that could be a real soldier kind of thing where you're literally in battle, or it could be like battle with your ego, or it's all about you, or it's about your individualism, or whatever it is. And if you choose, you go through the long, dark night of the soul, and you end up on the other side as a wise man or a wise person who is in service. And as I was mentioning before about boy kings, I think boy kings are when we get stuck in battle. Yeah. And I think that we often like when people are in battle, and we like when our leaders are in battle. And I think we need to stop doing that. We need to stop being, we need to really pay attention to when we are being charmed by our leaders rather than inspired. Charmed is seeming as if blessed by God, versus inspired, which is in the breath of God. And when we are charmed by our leaders because of their battle and their ego and their bravura, their bravado, we get into real trouble. And so, and I think that's a big part of the problems we're having in the world. And the question is, how do we invite forth moving into service? And I invite this for myself as well, because there are times when I love being in the ego battle. I love being in the fight, and I like being right, or trying to be right, and forget about the fact that if I'm right, someone's wrong, and then we're both wrong, and that's not helpful. But it's easy to forget that, and it's easy to want to be in that winning place,
of course,
which isn't helpful. So the question I would ask, and the question we ask in Quantum Warrior, is, can you find the places in your life? It could be a role as, father or husband or mother or teacher or whatever. Can you find the roles in your life where you are currently in battle? And how might you change those places of battle? How might you change the battles in your life to a place where you are in service? And simply thinking about it, simply putting your awareness on the places where battle is showing up or where fear is showing up, and thinking about how you could change it to a place of love, or move from the Newtonian to the quantum, or move from force to power. These are all the same concept, right?
Yeah.
How can you move into a place of service? Not because service is generous and helpful, but because service is actually a more powerful and enjoyable place for you and everyone around you.
Absolutely. Healthy, enjoyable. It's everything about it is actually, maybe at first it seems like it's harder, but it's actually, there's more ease there to be found. I love that, Ted. That is something that I won't soon forget. Where can I be in service? Where can I end the battle in my life and choose to be in service in that same, whatever it is, a relationship, whatever it is very applicable and very easy to remember. That's perfect. Thank you, my friend. If you could give one bit of general advice to the married couples that were having trouble, they were on the rocks, what wisdom would you impart that you think could help save their marriage?
Well, I've got two. The first one is, you can be right or you can be married, but you can't be both.
Fucking A.
And what that really means is if you are trying to win the argument, then you're not actually speaking to what either person needs. You are in a place of winning and losing, or in a place of fear, or in a place of the amygdala. So my experience with my wife, who I've been with for 20 years, and we fight a lot and we have problems and it's difficult and it's also wonderful. We sit in circle a lot. We pass a talking piece, and you don't need anything in order to pass a talking piece with two people besides a talking piece,
Right.
and to follow the 3 rules. And you don't even need the last 2 rules. You only need the first rule. Don't talk when you don't have the talking piece, period. And so really grab a talking piece and stop trying to be right and try to listen. And if you find yourself still angry when the other person's speaking, try to repeat back to the other person what you heard them say. So you're simply catching what they say rather than interacting with what they say. Because if you're still angry, you're probably not ready to interact with what they say in a way that's going to be healthy for either of you. But if you can really listen and not interrupt, that in and of itself could fix the problem. And I'll say this, my experience with my wife is that whenever she's upset or whenever I'm upset, I always think it's because of something. And she always thinks, or I'm not going to say what she thinks, but I would imagine she thinks it's because of something. And it's never because of something. It's always because one of us doesn't feel heard, witnessed, or appreciated, or seen. And once we feel seen or heard, which simply means the other person has the talking piece and you don't speak most of the time, it solves problems that all of a sudden vanish. It's the magnetic field way or the quantum way of solving the problem, rather than getting into the Newtonian details, which won't actually get you to the solution in the first place.
Right. No, they'll just bring you more fuel to argue about, It's very true. I mean, marriage is not easy. It took several bouts with a couples therapist for me and my wife. And what that taught us to do was exactly what you just said, was to listen, not so that you could win an argument, but listen and try to feel into what the intention behind, because when both parties are sitting there with their hands crossed, feeling hurt and unheard, then there's no communication that's actually happening. And any communication that comes from that place, is going to lead to more bitterment. But yeah, it's great advice. It's great advice. I got another one for you. If there was someone who was in a job that they hate, but they feel they can't leave, like they need this money to survive, what advice would you give them?
Do they feel they need this money to survive, or do they need this money to survive? Well, they're not the same thing.
They're not the same thing, I guess. Are they the same thing though? I mean,
no, I don't think so. I think there's a big difference between feeling something and needing something. We often don't know what we need. We often feel what we want. And my experience is that what we think we want is almost always not what we want. And if we had what we wanted, we'd be very unhappy because it won't solve our needs. So my answer to the first part of the question is really ask yourself, what do you need? But then the second part of the question is, if the job is specifically there to financially support you, to sing the song you must somewhere else. Like, for example, maybe you need to sing the song as a parent, or maybe you need to sing the song as a mentor, or maybe you need to sing the song as a musician. That's fine. It's not to say that everyone's job has to be their song they must sing before they die.
Right. No, I mean, I see it all the time. I guess I always think about that because the feeling, like you hear people all the time, like, oh my God, like, I feel like if I don't eat, I'm going to fucking die. Like, and it's not necessarily true, but that's how they feel. And we're in a world that is very much, and not, I'm not saying this isn't rightfully so, but, we are in the practice of validating feelings, not needs in this society. If we were in the practice of validating needs, then we would take a look at, the half of the millions and millions and millions of children who go to bed at night, hungry. And we would think about what we could do to solve that problem. But that's a harder question to look at. So I got confused.
Let's come back for 1 second. I don't think it's what you're just, I don't think it's that we are paying too much attention to our feelings. I think that we are saying, I feel, and then the words after it are the story we're creating, which is not a feeling. So when you say, I feel like that guy's an asshole, that's not a feeling. That's right. A story.
No, that's a thought, really.
That's a thought. It's also a story.
Yeah.
It's a cause and effect. It's it's a Newtonian understanding of the world that has nothing to do with you.
Right.
It's a projection into the world.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm not sure. So for example, my teacher, Thomas Jones, said something very interesting to me. He said, people are often trying to change the people around them by telling them what they're doing wrong or telling them what they're doing that they don't like or that sort of thing. And he said, it's a little bit like going into a cinema and going up to the actors on the screen and yelling at them and hoping that something will change. If you really want to change what's on the screen, go to what's being projected. Go to the projector that's inside the heart, your heart, and change what you're projecting. And you will change everything around you. If you decide that something is a certain way, it will show up that way. I think is it Dr. Porter who says, it's either Dr. Porter or Dr. Joe, I can't remember, who talks about thoughts are more important than things. And in the Porter, realm of, I think it's Porter, and that the thoughts actually change the things, that the thoughts are actually far more important than the matter.
Yeah.
That what we think matters is more important than the matter.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because you're changing at the slide. So what shows up in projection is obviously going to be changed first there, So absolutely. It's very true. I agree. Yeah, man. But this has been awesome. Dude, we have so much to talk about. You're just going to have to come on a fourth time and we're going to have to check in on how everything is going with these awesome things you're presenting to the world. And I want to know all, of course, I'll be updated on your podcast and, it's just love what you're doing, bro. I always love talking to you. It's always a pleasure. I'm so excited that you're going to go to a Joey D retreat. Hey, listen, you should know sometimes he sometimes he likes to tease and kind of poke fun at things like vegetarians and life coaches. There are some things that he likes to make little jokes about. Don't take anything personal because, of course, he's doing it with love. Just a heads up.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I think that maybe I don't like the phrase life coach because I'm not really sure what that means. It took me a long time to get even comfortable with using the word coach. I'm starting to play with the idea of listening coach, and not because I do the listening, although hopefully I do as well, but that I'm hopefully supporting people to listen better in their lives, because listening is the most powerful tool that I'm aware of. It is our true superpower as humans. We're all trying to learn how to fly. Some of us are taking rocket ships that are very expensive and look like, phalluses.
Yeah.
And some of us are trying to be invisible. And some of us are trying to do a lot of, superhero things. But I honestly think that the greatest superhero thing we can do is listen. Yeah. And man, it's a whole lifetime of getting good at it because you get better and better at it every day.
Listen, coach. I love that title. It's perfect for you.
Thank you.
You could run with it. Absolutely. It's been real, brother.
Great to see you.
I'll be in touch. We'll let you know when this is coming out, and we'll get all the links we need from you for the app and whatever you got going on.
Absolutely. And let me say, we are running online Quantum Warrior circles for men, and any men who are interested, you can email me directly, ted@tedwallach.com, and I'll tell you more about it.
Cool. Awesome, man. Perfect. All right, my friend. We'll talk again soon. It's been real. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Take care, Faust. Great to see you.
You too, brother.
Bye-bye.